Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about Avatar: The Rise of Kyoshi. So this is one of the books, not just like the comic books, but one of the books that were spun off and written about the Avatar: The Last Airbender universe. This is of course a prequel that centers around Avatar Kyoshi, the Avatar that came before Avatar Roku, which is the Avatar before Avatar Aang. So this is like 500 years or so ago, in terms of context of the first episode of the TV show. This is roughly 500 years before that. So it's really, really cool. So I think the idea of continuing to explore the universe of Avatar is really, really awesome. Because I know I haven't talked much about it on the show, on the show, on the channel before, but I love the cartoon. Like I watched it as it originally aired when I was ending high school, and was really obsessed with it. Loved it so much, and I do not even acknowledge that M Night situation. I don't really acknowledge that. And I also actually really enjoyed the Netflix adaptation. Maybe I'll make a video dedicated to just talking about that. Who knows? But I really did enjoy it. I think the changes they made were pretty interesting. So, yeah. So, I, of course, got into a huge Avatar mood after watching the Netflix show. So, I then picked up the Rise of Kyoshi audiobook. I wanted to listen to it and see how good it is and see, more about Avatar Kyoshi. Because in a lot of people's coverage of the Avatar Netflix show, they were saying that they were pulling in information from the Kyoshi books and from some of the more information we get about Avatar Korok and stuff. So I thought that was interesting. So that was another motivation to make me want to read it. So here we are. Let's go ahead and talk about it. As always, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and if you're interested in reactions and early releases and whatnot, go ahead and check out my Patreon. The link is in the description. So let's begin. So, one of the interesting things about this book to me is the way in which it had to be constructed. So, you're writing a prequel novel about a character that is well known. So, we know about the legendary Kyoshi. We know about her in context of the Avatar series and the Korra series. Well, I don't think Korra actually goes into Kyoshi at all. But even in the spin-off comic books like The Search and stuff like that, there is more information about Kyoshi out there. So there is a there's a significant amount of information about Kyoshi during her Avatar years that is available, like some of her greatest accomplishments and things. So there's like a decent amount of information known about her that basically makes up her status as a legend, because she is one of the most famous, most ruthless, most well-known avatars in history. She is known to be very honorable, but also ruthless, a prodigious warrior who could be merciless but also merciful, and like who's just righteous and like just basically a prime example of what an avatar should be. Like that is the reputation Kyoshi has. So I find it really interesting that that's the starting point for FCE. So she basically has the task of writing a story about a character that we already know so much about. So she has to figure out a way to give an origin that is both interesting, compelling, and worthy of this character, and give them a journey that is, again, interesting, compelling, and worthy of this character. And she also has to branch the 2 points in time. How did they start and how did they become who they became? So I think it's very fascinating, and it's a really interesting writing challenge. And after having finished Rise of Kyoshi, which is I think one of 3 books that detail Avatar Kyoshi's time period, I think it was done very, very well. I was very much into it the entire time. So I want to start off and talk a little bit of non-spoiler stuff, and then jump into spoilers. Let's start off, of course, non-spoiler. So I think it's really interesting that this kind of shows the way in which the existence of everything happened at that time, because we're obviously very used to the way the events play out in the series of Avatar. So to see the way everything was going on 500 years beforehand, I thought was very, very fascinating, because it implies so much more about the nature of being the Avatar, what that position is, how it relates to the other nations and stuff like that. It gives us a lot more information in that context than I even expected to get, because I'm so used to the way Korra and the way Aang's journeys went that I'm thinking what they went through is fairly typical, because they kind of, made it, kind of had to learn their own way as they went. But that's not exactly how it's always been in the past. So I thought that was just a fascinating juxtaposition to even start off with. So we immediately have that kind of idea. So I thought that was just like Just interesting, just fascinating, completely fascinating. Ate it all up, loved it. Um, and of course, apart from that, we get these really interesting characters. Like we know who Kiyoshi becomes. Like we know her reputation. We don't really we can't say we know her. Like from her time as an Avatar or even as a spirit or anything. Like we can't say we really know her. But like the some of the stuff we feel like we kind of have context for her personality because she's spoken to Aang and stuff. So we kind of feel like we know her, but we don't. So it was really interesting to truly get to know her and see just how different she was from where she ended up, which is even more interesting to know because Kyoshi is one of the longest lived avatars that has been, as far as the information for the avatars we get. She is one of the longest lived ones. So we're starting off very early in her life, but she lives a couple centuries. So it's like, whoa. It's like there could be levels of complete and total personality changes, multiple within that time period. So it's very interesting to see that she starts off in this way that she does, this very kind of meek and docile kind of person, and then to know that she just becomes this absolute ruthless warrior. It makes you really want to know and learn about that journey. Like, what was that journey like? So that is actually just one of the coolest things about the story to me, because I would have probably been stun locked with the trying to figure out how do I write a story like this with this context and with this much information already known about the character. I would have been stun locked. But I'm so happy FCE just was not and was able to handle it like a champ, and it just worked out so well. So, of course, this being part one of like three, we don't get, by the end of the story, she's not, the Kyoshi that we know. It's really just the beginning of her story. So, we're really just still at the beginning stages, even after finishing this one. So, it's just a really fun beginning of a journey, and it kind of has echoes of like a hero's journey feel to it while being totally different. So, there's just a lot of really good stuff in here. The pacing, I think, is pretty well done. It reminds me of the way in which the episodes of the cartoon were paced. So there's like a lot of points in it that, at least in my head, the way I read it and interpreted it, was that like there's points that feel like an end point that I would have almost called the end point of an episode. So it kind of has a similar TV pacing in a lot of ways. So I enjoyed that a lot. But the more I think about it and vocalize it, I'm like, that's also kind of weird. But I enjoyed it. Like I enjoyed it. I don't know if I was just so completely enamored with the fact that it's Avatar content that I kind of had rose-colored glasses on or something. But I enjoyed it pretty much all the way through. And we get this really interesting context about the way in which bending genetics and stuff works, which is something that's really not brought up. It's kind of implied and alluded to in Korra, but it's like not explicit and stuff. So it's really interesting to get kind of some explicit like conversation about the idea of two different breeders, God, two different benders of two different types like have a child. Like it has an implication to it. It has meaning and significance to it. So that's kind of fascinating. So I want to kind of get into a little bit more detail on some of these things. So let's go ahead and jump into the spoiler section so I can ramble a bit more. So yeah, spoilers for The Rise of Kyoshi. The Avatar Rise of Kyoshi. Whatever. So yeah, let's jump into spoilers. So let's kind of talk a little bit about points of the story that I really, really enjoyed. So I really like the beginning. I like the way in which we learn that Kyoshi essentially is an orphan. She was living on the street until she was basically taken in by this air nomad who became like her surrogate father. He was a really cool guy, really cool character and stuff. And I really like this idea that the Avatar is very much a political position. The way they're almost like kicking the position around like a football and stuff, and the way the sages of every nation, like they're supposed to go through the whole rituals and stuff and figure out who the Avatar is and make this big like formal announcement and stuff. And then they basically take the Avatar to the sages of the different nations, and they're trained essentially by the holy people and typically the if they're still alive, the companions of the previous Avatar and stuff. So I just thought it was just really, really interesting because of course I'm used to Avatar, Aang, and Korra, whose journeys were pretty much disorganized. I mean, I guess not actually when I think about it. Aang's journey was very disorganized, but I guess Korra's wasn't, because technically she had already been trained and she was kind of a prodigy in the other three elements until she went to air. And of course, air would be harder to train because there were no air nomads. So I guess Korra's journey to becoming, but she wasn't technically fully realized yet. But her journey to becoming a mostly fully realized avatar was closer to what it used to be as compared to Aang, I guess I'll say. But I think it's really fascinating because initially they named the wrong person because Korra died so young in comparison to most avatars. Like there was just kind of this weird, I don't know, it feels like his early death made it harder for them to immediately tell who the next avatar was, or it was just like political issues and stuff. But essentially, they couldn't find the next Earthbender avatar, and eventually they just had to use different methods, and they named this one kid Yoon. So he's a very prodigious Earthbender. He's very like his skill is well above and beyond most people's. So it became kind of course he's the avatar. Like they declared him the avatar. He's the avatar. He just hasn't learned any other bending yet. He just can't do any other bending yet. He just has to master earth bending before he can do any of the other stuff. Because they also are very staunch about, following the cycle, doing it in order, because that's the way, in order to appease the spirits and stuff, you have to continuously learn the elements in the proper order and stuff. So they weren't really hyper rushing him to move on to the next the next bending. So it had been like 6 years. So Kyoshi is now like his something like his retainer. She's like working in the palace and stuff. She's more or less a servant, one of his retainers and stuff. And it's kind of implied she has a bit of a crush on him and stuff too. Like he's a close friend of hers and stuff. And she's just, living her life. She's basically got the position she's got thanks to the airbender nomad that took her in and stuff. And she's made friends with this Fire Nation noble who's basically one of the bodyguards of the new avatar, Rangi. And she likes her and stuff. And she's like really cool. And I like the way to me, my brain immediately just said, this is Azula without the psychosis, because Rangi is like very abrasive and kind of assertive and will basically cuss you out. But Kyoshi basically makes mention in her POV that if she likes you, she'll cuss you out. She don't like you when she ignores you. So it's like one of those kind of personalities. So she kind of immediately became a Azula archetype in my head. So I really enjoyed those interactions. So I thought one of the most interesting things to happen in the story that I did not see coming, because I'm so used to the cartoon, it being very much aimed at children. So I wasn't expecting when we kind of reached this point of starting to figure out that Kyoshi is the avatar, because of course that kind of thing can't be hidden for very long. So they're doing this thing that's just a common kind of spiritual, almost philosophical exercise they do, where they're like making up poetry and songs and stuff and just kind of riffing a little bit. So Kyoshi goes and sings a little song that she just thinks she's making up off the top of her head. But she doesn't know that it's actually one of the poems, one of the original poems that Avatar Korok composed specifically for someone in his lifetime. And that poem wasn't very well known to a lot of people. So for her to just recite it verbatim perfectly with no context around it and stuff, thinking she perfectly made it up, that makes one of the former companions of Korok immediately like look up like, wait a minute. Wait, where did you hear that and stuff, like, suspicious. And so he immediately starts to think, holy crap, we've made a mistake. Maybe she's the avatar and stuff. So it becomes this whole thing. And of course, she is living this very humble life. She doesn't want to be the avatar or nothing. So she's, not really leaning into it and stuff. So eventually, one of the heir, I think he's also a former companion of Korok, but he's also like one of the Earth sages, and he's like a bigwig in the political play and stuff. He can pull strings from pretty much anywhere in the world, and control people in various nations and stuff. So essentially, he's got his fingers in everything. And he basically takes he takes Kyoshi and Yoon to the spirit that basically can read their spirit and pretty much know exactly who the avatar is and stuff. And when he immediately says Yoon is not the avatar, it's Kyoshi, he also requires a payment, and the earthbending sage guy just pushes Yoon into the place where the spirit is, and the spirit just like yanks him, so it's assumed immediately he's killed. And you're like, wait, what? You're like, what? Like, how does he? So essentially he goes ahead and just kills this kid, because he essentially is trying to cover up the fact that they made a mistake and misidentified the avatar. So that basically sets Kyoshi off. It freaks her out, obviously. She does a little bit of firebending, but she, of course, has no real skill or ability to really do anything. So when she tries to basically attack the guy for essentially sacrificing Yoon, it amounts to nothing. And she eventually is pushed and pushed until she hits the avatar state. And you think that, okay, this is going to clean it, it's going to wipe the thing because she, completely out of control power basically obliterates this area that she's in. You would think that the guy that killed her friend would be killed, but he's such a good enough earthbender that he knew immediately. He uses earthbending to basically make himself a bunker and drop down and deep into the ground while she's up there, tearing everything to shreds, and he just pops back out like it's no issue and stuff. So before that happens, she takes and before that even happens, the air nomad that took her in gets into a fight with that guy, and he immediately murders him. So like that's the first time I've seen an out. Actually, no, I guess the Dai Li did some murders too. But it feels like one of the first Avatar universe true murders. Like, so it kind of blew my mind and stuff. And but so when that happens, she essentially takes his air bison because the bison knew her and is like it was okay with her riding and stuff. So she takes off and basically goes and get her stuff and get ready to run. She knows she just got to run because she doesn't want to basically be made into a puppet and stuff like this. So as she's panicking and stuff, her friend Rangi sees that she's panicking and packing her stuff up to leave, and she's like, she doesn't even need an explanation. She doesn't need Karaki's going. She doesn't need Kyoshi to like explain it to her or anything. She just goes and get food and stuff. Like, I bet you didn't even pack up any food. It's like, we're gonna need food, blah blah blah. She's like, what? And she didn't. So Kyoshi had no idea Rangi would ever even go with her, would like be her companion and leave with her and stuff. She's like, no, I'm not letting you just run off on your own. Of course I'm coming with you. And this is after she tries to tell her that she may be the Avatar and stuff, and Rangi's not sure, but she's both going because her friend is going and she doesn't want to abandon her, but she's also like, just in case she is the Avatar, I'm supposed to be a bodyguard to the Avatar, so I'm definitely going to follow her also. So of course it turns out she is the Avatar, and this is when we get this thing that I think is really cool. I think Kyoshi might be the first Avatar to have a non-conventional training setup. So because she has to run away, she doesn't want to deal with the sages and all that stuff, the political mechanisms that have been created around the Avatar. So she effectively goes and rejoins the theater thieving group that her parents were a part of. So she ends up getting taught various, earthbending skills and stuff from these thieves and cutthroats and stuff. And she's essentially trying to learn as much as she can so she can go back and fight the guy that killed her surrogate dad and kill him and stuff. So the entire story is kind of her kind of descending into the crime world and kind of helping them a little bit, but they don't really do a whole lot of crimes, but she ends up being a part of this guild or whatever, and like they teach her different stuff, and she like, so it's kind of this really cool idea of like, she is technically the first one to have an unconventional like Avatar training thing. It wasn't Aang. I mean, honestly, there could have been. I mean, Wands was unconventional. Either way, like most of the avatars probably have a very run of the mill kind of training setup, and she just very much didn't. So I thought that was a lot of fun. And as we go on, we of course learn more and more and stuff, more and more stuff. But this entire overall event is kind of a blip in the history of Kyoshi because she lives 230 years, and this happens when she's like 16. So it's just like, whoa. But one of the cool things that happen is her and Rangi end up confessing their emotions for each other, and they end up becoming girlfriends. So I thought that was like really really cool. But then my brain immediately always keeps going back to Kyoshi's age, that we know how long she lived. So like it makes me wonder, like does like she stay with Rangi until they're like old, 60, 70, Rangi dies of natural causes or whatever, and then like, does that have an effect on Kyoshi that hardens her, and then she becomes the absolute like near merciless badass that we know about later? Is she more compassionate when Rangi's alive, or does she like, how does that affect her? Like, how do, because it's almost like an immortal character. That's how I'm starting to see a lot of this stuff. Because obviously, when Kyoshi, like even Chen the Conqueror, before she creates Kyoshi Island, like going into that battle, she might be 100 years old at that time. It's not very clear. I mean, granted, it might be in one of the two other books. I don't know. But she could be like over a century, years old at that point. Because she also, of course, that's where the makeup and the outfit comes from. It's the theater makeup because they're like a theater thieving crew. So that's kind of cool to see the origin of that. Even though it comes completely fully formed, which is a little lame. but whatever. I would have liked to, to see an evolution of it before it becomes Kyoshi Island, like evolve to that full look, but neither here nor there. But I thought that was just a really interesting thing. A lot of this stuff might only be a blip in her life, but we're starting to see how it affected, the person that she becomes. Because she immediately goes into revenge mode dealing with the person that killed her surrogate father and stuff. So we can kind of see that immediate, near no hesitation, willing to kill people kind of thing was always there. It was always a part of who she is and stuff. So I thought that was a lot of fun. And there's a lot of interesting bits about the fact that her mom is or was an airbender and her dad was an earthbender. And so this idea of her being an earthbender with air nomad blood is a concept. And it just, my brain never really thought about it like that. I guess I assumed few people, like, I assume few benders would end up with benders of a different type. I don't know. I guess I kind of assume like Katara and Aang was a little more of a special connection than it is. I don't know. So it's kind of a fascinating thing in the way the genetics play. So the thought of her having been the Avatar is like partially discouraged because she has air nomad ancestry. So they would assume that she wouldn't have been the Earth Avatar because she has air nomad ancestry, which is a concept I wouldn't have ever like you wouldn't think that would be a consideration, right? So it's kind of really interesting because we also see that concept kind of touched on in Korra in that they have an earthbender mom and a firebender dad or had. And, one brother is an earthbender, the other is a firebender. So instead of like it breaking down in that way, similar how one child of Aang's is a waterbender, one's an airbender, and the other is a non-bender, which is just kind of like, I guess that's Sokka's genetics or something, I don't know. But I thought it was kind of interesting because Kyoshi is not very good at earthbending in the beginning. So there's kind of an implication that she's not great at earthbending because she has airbending blood. So just as an idea, I thought that was just really fascinating because just that genetic lineage breakdown and stuff, how it would affect bending. I'm just very curious about it because clearly there's a genetic component to it, judging by the airbenders and stuff. So it's just brought up concepts and ideas that I hadn't thought about that I thought was really, really fun. So eventually, of course, because we know that Kyoshi lives for so long, there's no real stakes. There's no real danger of her getting truly killed or anything in the story. But eventually she does learn enough that she needs to know. She does go and confront the guy that killed her surrogate father, but she doesn't actually need to murder him. So it kind of absolves her from starting off her Avatar journey with this kind of dark mark on her record. So it's kind of cool, but she definitely would have murdered him had it been, totally required and stuff. I am noticing the day is as the day go, I am losing light. I am just losing light. But good thing we're about to wrap this up. So yeah. That was Avatar Rise of Kyoshi. It's just the kind of beginning of her journey. But I think it's a really, really cool beginning to the story of Kyoshi. She's one of my favorite avatars. Granted, we only know about maybe 5 or 6 or so. But she's one of my favorite ones. I thought she was really, really cool. And I really like this as the beginning of her journey. I can't wait to see what else we cover. I hope we do a solid time skip and then get at least somewhere past Chen the Great or whatever. Like I'd like to get deep into her lifetime since she's so long lived, and I'd love to see the way in which the nations and stuff are changing as a result of her issuing in this time of peace, even though their world seemed quite static until it hit the age of Korra. So I don't know. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here. So yeah, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Leave me in the comment section down below. Did you read this book? Have you read The Rise of Kyoshi? Are you familiar with the character? Let me know in the comments down below. What do you think of Kyoshi, Avatar Kyoshi? And all that kind of Avatar goodness. So yeah, with that being said, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And if you're interested in reactions and early releases and stuff, that's thunder. Ooh. Then go ahead and check out the Patreon. Link is in the description. So I will talk to y'all next time. Peace.